Hey, what is going on guys? RvzStealth here, and in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the jungle tier list for patch 7.10. So starting it off in the tier 1 for this patch is actually going to be Zack. Now you guys are probably wondering, why did Zack go from tier 3 all the way up to tier 1? The buffs he got in this patch were actually really big for him. So the buffs that he got a buff to his Q to where it now scales with a percent of his HP. It scales with 2.5% of his HP, and therefore you're going to be stacking a whole lot of HP on this champion. You'll get the Cinderhulk, you'll get a Spirit Visage, a Randuin's, and therefore your Q is just going to do so much more damage now. He did also get a buff to his E to where the knockup duration does increase if you do end up charging your E for longer, but honestly I think the main reason to why he got a lot stronger was because of those changes to his Q. To put this into perspective, in 7.9 Zack had a 44-45% win rate. In this patch he's got a 55% win rate. He's the highest win rate jungler in 7.10 and the highest win rate champion overall. I don't usually like to base my tier list off of win rate, and I usually don't, but for a champion to gain 10% increase in their win rate from one patch to another, it obviously means they are a pretty strong pick. And overall, Zack is still Zack. Even though he did get reworked, he still does have the main strength that he had before, being that he can gank from areas that basically no other jungler can't. With his elastic slingshot, his mid lane ganks are honestly some of the best for any jungler. He can gank from behind the mid lane wall, and it just allows him to easily burn flash almost every single time, and then he can repeat gank mid lane again and pick up a pretty free kill. So I just think Zack is a really hard champion to play against, especially if you are playing mid lane, and you just always have to be careful about the Zack ganking you, or else he's just going to end up snowballing the game out of control. So for Zack's matchups in this patch, as you can see there, he actually has a winning record against Ivern in this patch, and no jungler has actually been able to say that for a very long time. Ivern has not had a losing win rate against any jungler for like the past at least 4 or 5 patches now. So for a champion to actually be able to beat Ivern and to actually have a winning record against him means that they're a pretty good pick right now in this patch. So next up here is going to be Elise. Now Elise is also coming up from the tier 2 up to tier 1 in this patch. The reason for this is because 2 of the best early game junglers, or just 2 of the best junglers overall, did get nerfed in this patch, being Lee Sin and Graves. With those 2 junglers getting nerfed, and with Elise actually doing very well against those 2 junglers, it just overall makes her a much stronger pick. Elise has always been a pretty good counter to Lee Sin because of her spiderlings, and she's actually done pretty well against Graves too. With Graves getting that nerf a few patches ago to his E to where it no longer stacks MR, Elise is just a great pick against him, and I think that because people are still spamming Graves, he's still got like a 16% play rate in this patch. I think Elise is just one of the best junglers that you can play. And then she also does have one of the healthier clears for any jungler, with a lot of these other junglers right now having a very hard time like clearing out the raptors and just staying healthy on their first clear. With Elise's spiderlings and with her lifesteal when her W is active in her spider form, it just allows her to stay very healthy in the jungle, and she can gank after her second buff. A lot of junglers right now, they can't actually look to go for a gank after their second buff because they're pretty low on HP. A lot of them do have to bait. So with Elise being able to just gank at level 3 and have an impact very early on in the game, it makes her a great pick. So now for Elise's matchups right now, she is doing pretty bad against Ivern and Zack in this patch. That's really no surprise though. Most junglers do bad against Ivern, and most junglers are struggling against Zack right now in this patch too. But as you can see there, like I was talking about before, she's doing really good against Graves. She also does well against Lee Sin, Rengar too. So if any of those meta junglers are picked right now, then I would be looking to pick Elise against them. Next in the tier 1 here is what I would call the second best, or maybe tied for first best early game jungler right now, being Khazix. So Khazix in this patch, he's still a great pick. He was tier 1 in last patch, he's still tier 1 in this patch. He's one of the best early game dueling junglers. His ability to just snowball the early game is super good. If you can get a kill on the enemy jungler by invading them, or just get a kill by ganking, it's very easy for you to just constantly pressure the enemy jungler, constantly invade them, because especially once you do at level 6 as Khazix, you've got your evolved claws, and pretty much no other jungler can 1v1 you straight up if you do have your claws evolved. He's got some of the best Dragon and Baron control too. He takes them extremely fast, so once you do at level 6, look to solo Dragon or just look to go for even the Rift Herald you take very quick too. So I would be highly prioritizing top lane in this patch as Khazix. If it's an Infernal Drake first, then I would prioritize bot lane, but getting your top laner ahead and just quickly taking down that Rift Herald can get you a very nice snowball going in this patch. And then for Khazix's matchups, Nunu, Ivern, and Zack, no surprise there really, he is struggling a little bit against them, but Rengar, Graves, Amumu, Fiddlesticks, any of these weaker early game junglers or relatively weaker early game junglers like Amumu, like Rammus, Hecarim, Khazix can do great into. If you can get an invade on one of them in the early game and just shut them down, it's very easy for you to take over a game. And then lastly in the tier 1s here is going to be Ivern. Now Ivern did get nerfed this patch. It wasn't really enough to drop him down from tier 1 down into tier 2 though. He's going to need one more nerf probably to drop him down to tier 2. The nerf that he got this patch really didn't affect him too much because the only thing that it affected was how healthy his clear was. And if you really need to right now with Ivern, you can go Hunter's Potion on him in this patch if you do find yourself falling a little bit low in the jungle. He's still one of the most annoying junglers to play against though. He can completely shut down the enemy jungler in the early game if he does end up 3-buffing them. I think he's actually a really good pick against a lot of these early game reliant junglers like Elise or Graves or Lee Sin, because if you can shut them down in the early game and you can get to the mid to late game, then with Ivern you're going to outscale most junglers because you have your shields, you have the ability to keep your carries alive. So if you have someone like a Twitch on your team who is super meta right now, or you have an AD carry that just scales well into the late game, then chances are if you can just not let the enemy jungler snowball early game, you're gonna win a lot of the time with this champion. You just spam your shields on your carries, you watch them do the work, and you win games with Ivern. Now for Ivern's matchups right now in this patch, this is one of the only patches that he's actually had a losing record against a few different junglers. So junglers that are doing well against him right now are like Shaco and Nidalee. As you can see there though, they only end up, or that matchup only happens like 1% or 2% of the time. And for like the Skarner pick there, even though Skarner's winning a lot against Ivern right now, that matchup only happens 0.5% of the time. So it doesn't really give you the best indication that Skarner's a hard counter to Ivern or something. He is still doing really well against like Elise though, and especially against Lee Sin. As you can see there, the Ivern and Lee Sin matchup happens 20% of the time, and Ivern wins that matchup 56% of the time. So against Lee Sin, against Elise, Ivern is still a very strong pick in 7.10. Now for the tier 2 champions in this patch, these are the strong picks, and these champions can still perform very well in the right hands. The reason they're not tier 1 though is because usually there's a champion in the tier 1 that just does their job better. So for example, Nidalee, she's basically just a weaker Elise in this patch. Nunu is just a weaker Ivern, and like Shaco is just a weaker Khazix right now. So that's why these champions are tier 2 and they're not tier 1. Now, Rammus might actually be close to tier 1 right now. I think people are still playing him incorrectly in the sense that they're not actually maxing Q out right now on Rammus. It'll be interesting to see how he plays out in this patch. He could be a really good pick. I'm putting him in tier 2 right now though, not in tier 1, because I'm not completely sure how strong he is. I haven't yet played him myself, so I think he does have a lot of potential though. The buffs that he got in this patch are helping him out quite a bit. So if you are looking to play Rammus in this patch, I would highly recommend it, especially against someone like Master Yi or Xin Zhao or just an auto attack based jungler. Now the tier 3 champions in this patch, these are the average champions, so you can still perform well on them, but they just really aren't worth picking over a tier 2 or a tier 1 champion unless you're a main of the champion or you have very good skill on them. So for like Lee Sin and Graves right now, they got nerfed pretty hard in this last patch. Lee Sin's not really worth picking for solo queue unless you're really good on him. And then for Graves, I don't really think he's really worth picking at all right now. The damage nerf to his Q, it did hurt him a lot, and his ultimate nerf was honestly, I don't really think that was needed. I feel like they only needed to nerf his Q and he'd still be okay in this patch, but they've just targeted Graves really hard in these last few patches, and because of that, I don't really think he's worth picking over a tier 2 or a tier 1. And then for Xin Zhao, Master Yi, and Jax, they actually do have pretty high win rates for solo queue, but like I said before, I don't base these tier lists only off of win rates. I think that Xin Zhao and Master Yi, they're really good in the lower elos, but I feel like they just have too many exploitable weaknesses. They're just very easy champions to kite. If you have a decent CC team comp and a decent Peel team comp, then they're really not going to be able to do too much unless they can constantly split push, and to constantly split push, you heavily rely on getting ahead in the early game. So if you don't get ahead with one of these champions that relies on split pushing, then you're just going to be a very weak pick overall, and you're going to have very low impact on the game. So that is going to be all for this video, guys. If you did enjoy, then please be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you have yet to already. So thanks for watching, have an awesome day, and I will see you in my next video.